everyone. Everyone can take a seat. I think we have enough seats in the back for everyone, and we can close the door now. Thank you. All right, guys, welcome to the 2023 NBPA press conference. Thank you guys so much for being here. I know Saturday especially is a very busy day for all of you. So just want to get started right away. Today with us, we have NBPA Executive Director Tamika Tremaglio. We have NBPA President CJ McCollum, and we have newly elected NBPA First Vice President Grant Williams. Tamika is going to kick it off with some brief remarks, followed by CJ and followed by Grant, and then we're going to open it up for questions. So I'm going to relinquish my podium here to my boss.
Right. Well, thank you. Thanks so much, Ellie, and thank you all so much for being here. I know it's a fun and exciting weekend. Hopefully you all have had the opportunity to take account of some of the fabulous activities that we're having today. Beginning, I just came back from the HBCU event, which is great, but in addition, you should know that All-Star is so incredibly special to us for a lot of reasons. One, because it's the first time that we really get the opportunity to celebrate our players individually all year, right? We all know that it's always about our players, but having this as an opportunity has been incredibly great. I also am so grateful that I'm actually in this room with all of you who have sort of been on this journey with me over the last year. I am really grateful for your friendship and for your kindness throughout this entire time. And it made today feel a little bit better than sort of walking into a room, so thank you very much for that. So we know it's our 72nd All-Star. Can you imagine that? And it is, quite frankly, the second time that I have actually found myself at the All-Star. The first time was quite interesting because it felt a little bit like a whirlwind. The second time, it sort of feels like home, partly because I've had the pleasure to work with such an amazing executive committee and board of player reps and all of our 450. In particular, CJ McCollum, who is the president of the National Basketball Players Association, has really been an incredible confidant and guide and person that I've really taken the privilege to learn from over the last year, specifically to learn the needs of our player. Gratefully, Grant, who is continuing to stay on our board but has been elevated to a new level as our first vice president, replacing Andre Iguodala, who's taking on that role. I'm especially thrilled to have the opportunity to work with you. And I want to thank, obviously, Andre for his time and presence with our union. He is a tech titan, a business titan, and he has really been instrumental in growing the game of basketball, but in particular, really working with our players as well. So thrilled about that. We also have Kyrie Irving, who is stepping down. We have spent a significant amount of time with Kyrie. He has been an instrumental part of our executive committee. He is always present. He has been someone that people have really considered to be a mentor and that they have sought advice from. So Kyrie will certainly be missed, but we are grateful for the time that he has spent with us and the union. We do have two newly elected vice presidents. So Donovan Mitchell, who I just left at the HBCU game, and then Jaren Jackson, certainly all of you know, who is not only not new to the game of basketball, but sort of grew up in it with his father as well. So he's thrilled to be taking on this role. So thank you and congratulations to our new members. I also want to just take a few minutes to talk about how important it is that we spend this time, our winter meeting, with our executive committee and our board of player reps. Our executive committee and our board of player reps are incredibly thoughtful, and they were really engaged in terms of all of the things about the union and the business of the union. But more specifically, we spent a lot of time really talking about the collective bargaining agreement over the last couple of days. But as you all know, over the last year, I've spent really the focus of my time on three things: the development and protection of our players, which is first and foremost; the future of basketball, which of course includes all of our business opportunities; and fairness and equity, which is near and dear to my heart and near and dear to the heart of our players. First, beginning with the development and protection of players, You all know that this has been a tough period of time in terms of what we're coming out of. We also know that our men have played 44 games already this season, and this is actually the only break that they get, but they are taking out the time to be with us. So we have to think about, are we positioning them? Are we making sure that they're in the right place? We have a group at the union that really focuses on player programs, player engagement, that focuses on their transition. That's led by our new Chief Player Engagement Officer, Krista Chen. We also have been very much focused on global, because now we are at the point where we have 25% of our players are international players. So under the leadership of Matteo Zaretti, they spend a significant amount of time engaging and acclimating our players to playing ball here in the US. That's significant for us. We also have been looking at the future of basketball. And as I have certainly not been shy about, business opportunities is something that is critically important to me, and certainly critically important to our players. So we're looking at ways in which we can grow the pie. We're looking at ways in which we can increase revenue. This is about the economic benefit to our players, and we are considering what that means. So when we talk about the future of basketball, we're in a very different place. We are engaging with fans differently. We're using wearables and devices that are giving us more information than we ever imagined was possible. And then lastly, fairness and equity. It sort of goes without saying, right? That is critically important. So we talk about this pie, and CJ and I sort of joke about the pie and the slices of the pie, but the reality is we want our fair share of the pie. It's actually quite simple. The greatest asset that we have are our players. The people that you all come to watch and see are our players. So shouldn't they be recognized, certainly, for their contributions to the game? It's simply just fair and equitable, and that's what we're here to make sure is obtained. So this, as you know, is a true partnership with the league as we talk about what we're going to do as business partners, how we're going to grow the pie, but we are never keeping our eyes off the prize and making sure that our players are first and foremost, and they continue to be our priority. So in that vein, I'm going to turn it over to CJ McCollum, our president of the National Basketball Players Association.
Thank you, Tamika. I'll lift this up a little bit. Thank you, Tamika. First of all, as she said before, thank you all for coming. I understand how busy the weekend is in general, especially on Saturdays with the practices, trying to get to media availability, the appearances everyone has. So once again, I appreciate you guys being here. I want to thank Tamika for all her hard work, obviously continue to figure out ways to build our business while supporting us and pushing us further and further forward during our collective bargaining agreements. I want to thank Grant for continuing to sacrifice his time, his energy, and his efforts towards building our game, continuing to educate our young players on the importance of being present, being professional, and figuring out ways for us to continue to educate our fans about the game. Congratulations on being first vice president. I want to obviously thank Andre Iguodala. I want to thank Kyrie. I want to thank all of our player reps, all of our executive committee for the countless hours that we've spent, not only this year, but over the course of my career on learning and educating not only myself, but other players who have come before us and that will come after us. In terms of ways in which we're moving forward, I'm thankful to see how the game has continued to grow over the course of my 10-year career. I'm thankful for the global impact that we've had, obviously. You guys have seen the impact of international play with the Giannis's of the world, the Jokers of the world, who could potentially win his third straight MVP. I think all that is great in terms of how our game is growing, in terms of how our revenue is growing, and I think we're certainly heading in the right direction. We're building something extremely special, and it takes a true partnership. And as I've said before, the relationship between the Players Union and the NBA is unlike any other sport that you'll see in terms of how consistent we communicate, how effectively we communicate, and how happy we are with what we've been able to build together. And I think that as we continue to move forward, that won't change. In terms of the union in itself, I'm thankful for our staff, all the hours that have been put in up to this point to make sure that things are in our favor, continue to protect our mind, our body, our spirit, but also our finances is something that we're all thankful and happy to be a part of. Obviously, we're going to get into questions about CBA and things of that nature, and we look forward to answering those questions. But I would say that we're in a great space. We're continuing to move forward, and I'm happy with the progress that we've continued to make, although there is room for more improvement in areas in which we'll continue to grow. I'd say we're definitely heading in the right direction. With that being said, I thank you guys. I'm looking forward to the questions. And before we get into the questions, I want to welcome newly elected first Vice President Grant Williams, who happens to also play for the Boston Celtics.
Hello, everybody. I just want to say, first off, thank you to not only the player reps that voted me in, but also to Andre Iguodala and all my other board members that allowed me to be here today. As a younger player in this league, I'm excited to not only help every single player in this league be heard, to have their voices really have truth behind it and be able to connect with every single player in this league. I'm thankful to be able to serve with you, Tamika, with you, CJ, and to accomplish a lot of great things moving forward. I'm excited to continue to work with the CBA and excited to continue to really see this league develop and grow as we continue to make progress. And it's like we said, it's not overnight, but we're going to continue to work at it every single day. So thank you.
Okay, we're going to open it up for questions now. I'll ask for you to raise your hand, and I will call you out by name, and Kieran will pass the mic around. So, anyone? Sam Amick with The Athletic. Kieran's coming with the mic. Kieran.
Up top.
There you go.
There you go.
There we go.
There you go. In terms of where our main focus is, I would say collectively we've continued to figure out ways to help grow the game first and foremost, making the game better for our fans, making the game better for our league, our union, and our players. I think that's always been the main focus. Obviously, everybody's going to talk about finances. Everybody's going to talk about, a lot of the sticking points that we're seeing on TV today. But for us, I think it's about the quality of game. As we've learned, this is a very financially driven sport where we generate a lot of money collectively together, and I think we're continuing to see great strides in that in terms of attendance, in terms of the global impact that we're having internationally. And I think for us, we just want to continue to figure out ways to make the game better, and I think that's where my mindset has been in terms of sticking points and things like that. I'm not going to go into details, but I think kind of where we're at, in terms of ways in which the game can improve, ways in which we can improve as players and improve our game for our fans as well.
Let's go to, I saw Jeff, I think you had your hand up. Jeff Silgett, USA Today.
Thank you for having us here. Just to follow up on that, can any one of you three characterize the optimism or lack of optimism you may have about getting a deal done? Because when I hear both you and Adam talk, there seems to be a lot of initiative to get a deal done. What do you think the chances of that happening are rather than a lockout?
Oh, thank you very much. I do appreciate the question. First of all, I don't think a lockout would benefit anyone, right? I also think it's important that we all recognize, to some extent, our players stated from the very beginning that they were fine with having the contract continue through the 23-24 season. Really, we are in a position now to consider whether or not we will opt out. And so as a result, we have spent significant time really determining what are the next steps. We've exchanged many proposals, hundreds in fact, in terms of the things that we want, in terms of the things that they want. But I am relatively positive that we are heading in the right direction.
Tanya Ganguly, The New York Times.
Hi guys, thank you. CJ, you mentioned the quality of the game and being able to grow it. One conversation that's been had this season especially has been about the length of the schedule and the toll that it takes on your bodies as players. And there's also a lot of money tied to the length of the schedule. How do you? I'd love to hear from multiple of you, but how do you think about that?
Yeah, as a player who's sitting up here with something on his thumb right now, I understand the importance of being present and being able to play, but also the importance of taking care of your body. And an 82-game schedule is obviously difficult on the mind and the body. I'm sure you guys go through it as well as you travel and meet us in certain cities and fly and kind of go through the rigors of that. But that is what we signed up for. That is the way the game has always been historically, and the players that have come before us have honestly played under less fortunate circumstances and situations and still been able to get through 82-game seasons. So for me personally, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the union in this sense, but I personally enjoy playing 82 games because it's a mental challenge, a physical challenge, and when you get to the playoffs, you get to see the cream rise to the top, and I think that's the cool part of our journey. Obviously, we want the season to be competitive throughout in the regular season as well as the playoffs, and it's about continuing to figure out ways to take better care of your body, to utilize the resources that you have so that you can perform throughout an 82-game season. And sitting next to a Boston Celtics player, right? And, he plays every night, right? 49 minutes in a back-to-back to finish the All-Star break, whereas a lot of guys might have sat out. He was playing. So I think that kind of shows you the mentality of a lot of our players. It's do what you can to help empower our game, empower our sport, and provide entertainment for our fans.
Absolutely. I'm in complete agreement with CJ's sentiment. For myself, I don't speak on behalf of the union here. I believe that every game is vital. I've always been that way my entire life in my career. And for me, I always say that life is too short to not take advantage of the opportunity that's available. But in regards to anything else, in regards to other players, I can't speak on that currently, but I'm thankful to play for the Boston Celtics and to support this union along the way.
So Tanya, maybe I'll just add on behalf of the collective, on behalf of the union, I think it is important to recognize that our players love the game of basketball, and they love to play the game of basketball. And so I think, for many of you who may have had the opportunity to participate in the Tech Summit yesterday, we talked about, load management and what that meant, right? And in particular, Mark Cuban actually said that that's not coming from our players. Our players are fighting us many times to make sure that they're getting the opportunity to play. And so I just want it to be clear that our players want to be out there. They want to be engaged.
Okay, Vince Goodwill with Yahoo Sports.
Good afternoon, guys. We've heard over the past couple of years from the commissioner side, from the league side, that they want to integrate a mid-season tournament at some point that would incentivize more regular season play or financial incentive or whatever it is. We haven't heard much from the player side of things. Are you as optimistic about the advantages of it, or are there still a lot of concerns on the logistics or even the practicality of a mid-season tournament?
I think we are optimistic about some of the opportunities that can be associated with a midseason tournament. Obviously, still working through the logistics, what that kind of looks like, the financial implications behind a midseason tournament. I think as a player who's played in playing games, probably more than I would have liked to at this point in my career, I think there was probably some pessimism and optimism, mixed in from our fan base about what that's going to look like. And I think based on recent years, it's been a success. I think people have enjoyed it, the competitive nature behind it, the fact that teams who would normally not have a chance to make the playoffs have a chance to play in competitive, meaningful games. As a player who played in Portland, right, a playing game there, played in New Orleans, a playing game there, I understand the importance of that to our fan base, the competitive nature behind it. And I think as a player who has a brother in Europe, who's played in Europe, 13 years to this point, I've seen the success in that when it's done correctly. Now, that's another story, but making sure that we do it correctly and kind of get the right things in place. I think we're working towards that, but personally speaking, having seen how it's done in Europe, I'm personally not against it.
Mike Vorkanow, The Athletic.
Hey everyone. I just want to ask, obviously there's been some thought about the next media rights deal, which will kick in 2025. Last time obviously there was no smoothing. Do you have a preference whether this time around to smooth or not to smooth? CJ, it seems like you do. And has that been a part of your negotiations with the league so far to get ahead of that through this current CBA, however that comes out.
So Mike, first of all, thank you for being here. We appreciate that. And as you know, we don't typically negotiate in the media, right? But we certainly recognize that the new TV deal is something that everyone is considering. And, you know, the thing that we feel comfortable in is knowing that the content is there, right? People want to see basketball. People want to see live basketball. So certainly you could assume that those are things that we're talking about as well.
Tim Bontemps, ESPN, and then we'll go to Gary.
Cool. Tamika, you mentioned before, you mentioned before that really the choice was for whether you guys wanted to opt out at all or have the agreement extended another year. I was curious, in your conversations about it, how much did you guys push to just have this carry forward another year? And what were sort of the things that have led you to decide that negotiating now is the better way to go?
Yeah, so it certainly makes sense to sort of put things out on the table. We are in a position clearly where we want to talk about what the business opportunities look like. And clearly the sooner that we do that, the better, right? But the reason I mention that primarily is because I think it is important to recognize, I think there's a misnomer out there that we have to finish now, we have to get this done. And in fact, that is not the case.
Just as a follow-up, is there, I guess, what level of, I don't want to say pressure is the right word, but what level of motivation or urgency is there to get something done in the next 6 weeks and not have this move forward into the playoffs when obviously, you know, guys like CJ and Grant are hoping to make long playoff runs and there's focus on a lot of other things at that point?
Yeah, so we are very motivated to get this done, right? We are, by our nature, you know, our players are very competitive and we want to see some completion as well. So it is absolutely a priority for us.
Gary Washburn with the Boston Globe.
Guys, thank you for doing this. Adam has basically said that he wants to change the one and done rule and have high school players be able to enter the draft, but he's also said you guys have to collectively agree on that. What is your stance on high school players coming to the league, and is there a better structure now for younger players than it was in 2005 when the rule was abolished?
No, well, thank you very much, and really great question. So, as you know, again, that this is something that we have had conversations about. Clearly, we're not going to negotiate in the media with regards to that, but what I will say is that in our meetings today, we spent a lot of time talking about that. And I think you alluded to that when you said sort of back in 2005, we recognize that we really do need to make sure that we have the structure in place if we're going to have people join the league at the age of 18. We also appreciate that there is a lot of benefit to really having veterans who can bring those 18-year-olds along. And so, you know, certainly anything that we would even consider, to be quite honest, would have to include a component that would allow veterans to be a part of it as well.
You want me to comment? I think, you know, I went to school for 4 years, so my take is a little different. I understand the importance of providing opportunities, you know, for 18-year-olds that are ready, but I think the important part, like you said before, is having the infrastructure in place to continue to mold, to continue to educate, not just the financial implications, but how to be a professional, how to maneuver in this industry, because it is different. I think the second component is important. You know, having a Udonis Haslam-like player in your locker room is important in terms of educating players. You know what it's like. You watch a team, a guy gets a DNP one night, first time in his career. He's had a DNP coach's decision in which he doesn't play. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with the rigors of working out and being a practice player, not being in the rotation? We've had guys talk about the importance of making it to the playoffs. In the playoffs, 8 guys play on most teams, maybe 9. So that leaves a lot of the roster not playing. How do they deal with that mentally? What is the toll on their families? What is the toll on them individually? So being able to have that veteran presence is extremely important if you're going to lower the age pool. And I think that's kind of where my mindset's at. But I do like the idea of providing opportunities, more opportunities for more players, if that's what the collective group wants.
Similar sentiment. The growth of the game is the most important thing for us as a union. And like I went to college for 3 years myself as well, and I definitely matured in that time. But the biggest focus is that we have a structure in place to make sure that these 18-year-olds, if they were to be able to come into the NBA, are not only taken care of on their teams, but also in life. we want to make sure that they're taking care of professionals and making sure they understand that their mental health is very important, and make sure that we have their backs on night in and night out basis. So in regards to the age of 18, we are in discussions, but we just do our best to communicate with one another our sentiments and how we feel about every single day.
Ben Golliver, The Washington Post.
So there's been a pretty loud and ongoing conversation about trade requests, especially among star players. I think in the past, Adam said he prefers that those stay private. We've seen a lot of players make them publicly and also make them earlier in their contracts in terms of the term length. Kevin Durant said today he actually thinks trade requests are good for the NBA because it sparks conversation, gets fans excited, and so forth. Do you have a position on whether this trend of trade requests is good for basketball in general, and then has Adam or anybody else with the league sort of brought this up as a concern in your talks?
I think looking at this situation with social media, it kind of controls the narrative, right? I haven't seen players openly say, I want to be traded. I've just seen the rumors of the Wojs or the Shams of the world reporting that there was a conversation had behind closed doors. So I can't speak to conversations behind closed doors are supposed to be behind closed doors, similar to how it is in your working environment. If you're unhappy in your working environment, you speak to your boss or your superior in private, it's supposed to stay private, but in our world it doesn't. So I think that's a factor in which we have no control over, quite frankly, and sometimes it can be leaked from the actual organizations or teams to kind of figure out the value of certain players and what they may be able to potentially get in terms of picks and players. So I think there's a component there that a lot of times isn't publicized and not thought of, but I think player movement is good for our league. I think there's a way in which you can do it, but I think it is good for our league. It creates dialogue, it creates conversations. You see the talking shows, the networks, how it shifts the dynamic, and I think from a fan's perspective, when you have a chance to get certain types of players, I think it makes the game a lot more interesting, and then you allow other teams to become more competitive. If you look at this previous trade deadline, once Kevin Durant was traded, teams began to offer more picks, more players, because they felt like they had to be a little bit more competitive and a little bit more engaging in terms of potentially trying to put together a championship roster.
No, I think the one thing that Adam and I have discussed is how great of a season we are having and how competitive it has been. And certainly the fact that we have seen so many trades just sort of signifies that, people do believe that they can create a championship team, and they do think it's some place that the teams can go. So it makes sense that given this timeline and the deadline that we had, that we'd see the largest that we've had in history with 49 trades. I think that is a par for the course given how competitive this season has been.
Anyone else? No? Any last takers? No? All right.
He said,
We got one?
Two more.
All right, Mike.
thinking about it?
Mike, round two. Mike Vorkanoff.
Mike, we didn't do a good job on the first one?
I want to hear CJ's thoughts. So you laughed.
I play in the Smoothie King Center, so I just thought Smoothie King Arena.
Cap smoothies for the next one.
I like smoothies. Just leave it at that.
There had been reporting earlier on about the league's insistence on what it calls the upper spending limit, if I have the terminology correct. Has that ever been a consideration for you guys with the union? And what do you think, or do you think there needs to be any way to rectify teams like the Clippers and the Warriors who are outspending their competitors, or is that something that should be decided by these CBA discussions, or is that an issue for the league altogether, or just fine the way it is?
Yeah, so Mike, really great question. And to answer your first question, has it been considered? Yes, it has been considered, and no, it is not acceptable. The second part of your question with regards to the other teams, I think the one issue that has been quite confusing to many people is the amount that Golden State pays. But I think we have to be clear that that's not necessarily all related to actual salary, actual compensation that our players are receiving, but rather it is a tax tax that's being placed. And so that really is more of the issue than it is whether or not we should have a cap in salary.
One more question we can take here. Lev? Lev, I'm going to butcher your last name, so Lev from Sportico.
Thanks for having us. I remember there being a lot of discussion last year about sort of all-NBA awards and the media voting on them and the fact that they're so heavily tied to some players' contracts. Is that something that the Players Association is looking to change, both sort of how those awards are determined and also the way they're tied to money?
I think as a journalism major and member of the worldwide leader in sports, I think it's a lot of pressure on you guys, right, to have to make decisions that impact people financially. So I think, if you look at the other side of it, it's tough to put you guys in that position to have to make decisions that literally impact how much money certain players make. I don't necessarily have an idea of a better alternative, but if you have any, feel free to recommend some that we could kind of revisit and discuss in private.
All right, I think we're all done. Tamika, you want to just wrap us up real quick?
Sure. Well, thank you all so very much for coming. We really appreciate it. I certainly appreciate you going on this journey with us. Our players appreciate being here and that you took the time out of this busy weekend to be with us. So thank you very much. Enjoy All-Star.